On today's episode, I talk to the incredible Brett Larkin. She is a renowned yoga and meditation teacher, founder of Uplifted Yoga, and an expert in creating online yoga teacher training programs. Brett is known for her unique blend of traditional yoga practices with modern technology, helping students and yoga teachers worldwide deepen their practice from the comfort of their own homes. Her approach emphasizes the integration of the mind, body, and spirit through movement, breathwork, and meditation. Through her popular YouTube channel, online courses, and uplifted yoga program, Brett offers accessible, in-depth teaching on yoga philosophy, mindfulness, and the benefits of a consistent practice. She has built a global community of yoga practitioners and is widely regarded for making yoga and meditation relatable and approachable at all levels. Brett Larkin is not only a leading yoga instructor, but also a multifaceted entrepreneur and creator. She has a background in ballet and modern dance with over 25 years of training and is ballet bar certified. Before fully embracing her yoga career, Brett worked in the tech industry, where she combined her love for movement with technology by developing fitness and dance video games. She holds a BFA from NYU's Tisch School of the Arts, which further reflects her creative and artistic background. She is also a mother of 2 sons and has shared aspects of her family life, such as her home birth experience, on social media platforms. Brett continues to expand her educational offerings, having certified over 3,000 yoga teachers globally through her Uplifted Yoga program. Well, this woman is an absolute firecracker. She is so fascinating. We talk so much about Kundalini Yoga, and she actually interviewed me on her podcast, and we were talking a lot about the overlaps between her work and human design. We talked quite a bit about the chakra system specifically. So Brett is a 1-3 sacral manifesting generator, and she is the cross of the unexpected. And I mean, wow, she literally, her gate 31 is in her personality sun, and she's absolutely the voice of a leader. The way she talks about in detail yoga and the wisdom of yoga, and even the way she uses the languages, the different language she pulls from, whether it's the yoga names for things or the Ayurvedic names for things, that the language, the stories, like, it's such an example of a line one. So in her detail, she's absolutely been down the rabbit hole and studied all the details and information. She also talks a lot about all the experiences that she's had over the years as a line 3. And it was beautiful because we started to talk a little bit about how her work and how human design could really support that. Even talking to, she does a program that is all about personalities, like yoga poses for your personality. And I was like, wow, we could do this with type. It was super exciting. Brett's core talent is the 8. And again, I think her success really shows how she has led from a place of her own unique style, her own unique way of creating things, and of course contributing to the whole. So I'm going to let you go and enjoy this episode, and especially enjoy where we talk about her north and south node on both sides being the gate 1 and gate 2. So, or at least gate 2 and then gate 1. So enjoy the human design geeking out and enjoy the rest of the interview. Hey, everyone, and welcome to today's episode. I am super excited to talk to the incredible Brett Larkin today. Welcome to the potty.
I'm so happy to be here.
I am super excited to talk to you because I have been fascinated by Kundalini Yoga. Not that I've ever done it, but one of my besties is right into it. My ex used to do Kundalini, and I was like, I really want to do it for me, but I've just never kind of got around to it. So I definitely want to go down that road. But before we get there, I love to kick off with really asking about your journey. So I talk a lot about purpose in my work, and I do believe that in many cases, our purpose is like catalyzed in this moment of a dark night of the soul. We're faced with a specific challenge, something's happening in our life, and we actually make a decision, you know what, I'm not going to run from this, I'm going to run into this. And that kind of is the beginning of who we are today. So I would really love to hear your journey from potentially somewhere like that to this incredible human you are today.
Dark night of the soul. Well, there's so many things that come up, from the fear of starting my yoga business, of charging money for yoga. I mean, I definitely had the starving artist complex of feeling like, well, I can't earn money doing that, or I shouldn't charge for helping people. I think there was a denial for a long time about my identity as a healer. That's really, actually, it was weird because I was like in corporate America and I was like, I really want to touch people. I want to heal people with my hands. And I'm just like, where is this coming from? But, I was born to a father who had chronic pain, and I actually was kind of his little healer my whole childhood without really ever seeing it in those terms. I also then think about my father's passing, which I write about in my book. It's actually the opening of my book, because I had this interesting year, Emma, where my business, which is certifying yoga teachers online, exploded in growth. My father was dying of cancer, and I was his sole care provider along with my husband, because I'm the only child from that marriage and he never remarried. So really, it was like me, my husband, and him. And I gave birth to my first child, all in a 12-month period. So
Wow.
obviously getting a new baby is good and having explosive business growth is good. Obviously, my father, walking this death portal with him, was, my husband and I have never been the same. Honestly, it was such a intense experience, and then all of these things happening simultaneously, it really changed the way I practice yoga. It changed the way I think and talk about yoga, because up to that point, I'd been meditating for an hour a day, teaching at studios, going to super long classes. I had a lot of time for my sadhana, and my book Yoga Life is kind of about, well, what happens when that gets all taken away from you? Because I literally couldn't practice the yoga that I had been preaching to others to do, or doing myself. So I don't know if that answers your question, but those are kind of that was a very chaotic and dark year for me.
Isn't it crazy? Again, like it just the culmination of the light and the dark,
Mm-hmm.
that hugely transformative. And it's fascinating. As you were speaking, I was just having a quick look at your chart, and um, on the design side, your design sun, there's a theme of what we learn from the parents, from our father, or something that we bring down from our father. And you actually have the gate 27, which is the nurturer. So it's fascinating that you were his carer. Like it feels like that's really fully in alignment, which is pretty cool. The other thing that I think is really interesting is you talking about this polarity, and before we hit record, you were talking about the masculine and the feminine, the light and the dark. Like I mentioned something on your podcast, and you're like, oh yeah, there's like all of these different polarities. And in your chart, your human design chart, in your nodes on both sides of your chart, so not everyone has the same nodes, the same gates on both sides, but you have the same not goats, gates. And you have the 2 and the 1, and the 2 is the feminine and the 1 is the masculine. And the nodes are the path that we walk in a lifetime. So it really sort of says like you really are walking, from the masculine to the feminine in your life. Does that feel like it resonates?
Oh my goodness, so much. I mean, that leads to us ultimately, hopefully, talking about feminine form Kundalini today, and so much of the more feminine somatic work that I'm putting out there with a somatic training now. And yeah, even in my own personal life, it's really all about moving towards the feminine, where I think earlier in my life, it was very much in that masculine energy. And we can totally break down these terms. We can talk
Yeah,
about
let's
what they
go.
mean from both like a Vedanta or Tantric viewpoint. I don't know where we want to kick off, or maybe we want to start with Kundalini. I mean, if we want to ride the wave we're on, in the
Let's do
yoga,
it.
Tradition, we have Samkhya philosophy, which I talk about in my 300-hour teacher training, which it doesn't have a deity involved. So they have this polarity of what they call Purusha, which is basically nothing, no thing. unbound consciousness. I often think of it as outer space.
Wow.
And prakriti, which is matter, everything that's manifest, you, me, the desk, my glass of water, everything that's on this plane of consciousness. And what happens is there's a split, right? There's wholeness, and then Purusha and Prakriti split, and then the universe comes into being through all the elements. So that's one, kind of Indian school of philosophy that we see. The other is very different, right? And it might be one that people here might be more familiar with, which is this idea of Shakti and Shiva. So it's the same idea. We have Shiva, who'd be the equivalent of Purusha, this unmanifest, unbound energy. So think out there, kind of outer space, and Shakti, who is manifest. But the myth that goes with this, and obviously this framework has deities, right, is that Shiva, the god, was meditating in deep, deep meditation for hundreds and hundreds of years. And Shakti, his lover, was dancing before him, trying to wake him up because she knew that they were destined to be together. And in this story, instead of a split, what happens is she slowly, eventually manages to wake him up, and it's their divine union together that ends up creating the universe.
I love that.
Yes.
Goosebumps.
So and I love that story too, because it's like, if it feels sometimes slow to awaken, it's like, well, it even took Shakti like hundreds of years to wake up Shiva. And then what I talk about in a lot of, when we look at these philosophies, and we see this in Genesis as well, for those of you that, are Christian or familiar with the Bible, right? Those opening lines is all about separation, right? So God is separating the light and the dark, and the water and the land. And we see this in Samkhya as well, right? The different elements are separated out, the gunas, the tattvas, like all these different pieces that make up the world are kind of cataloged and inventoried. And with Shiva and Shakti, with that lineage, we see that in order for something to come into being, it has to go through the process of basically splitting, or that we pay the price of polarity to become manifest, to come into being. And I think this is a great way to just think of like all wisdom traditions, right? Yoga is asking us to potentially meditate or move our energy up to our third eye, up to our crown, to reconnect with universal intelligence, right? Universal wisdom, which we would associate in this analogy with Purusha, right? Or the kind of the Shiva consciousness. It's actually called Brahman in Vedanta, right? So the fact that we're all interconnected, we're all God, we're all made up of the same stuff, right? But when I come into being, I forget that. I forget who I really am. In the yogic tradition, we call this avidya, ignorance, right? That's what they say the problem is here on Earth School, that we've forgotten our real identity. We've forgotten that we're really God, that we're really whole. Instead, we think we are our personality. So an analogy I like to use here too is like, if you see the sperm hit the ovum, the first thing that it does, if you've watched an embryonic development video ever, you probably had to at like middle school or whatever.
School, yeah.
Yeah, it's sex ed, right? But what's the first thing that happens? The sperm hits the ovum, and what? The ovum splits into two, and then it splits again, and then it splits again, and then it splits again. So it's like this fragmentation, this splitting, is kind of the price that we pay in order to be manifest, instead of formless blobs, right, out in the ether. And then as that splitting process happens, what occurs is our individuality gets attached or baked in as well. What makes me look different and be unique from you, for example. So then all this yoga wisdom and lineage, including Kundalini, which we can talk about, is really about like, well, how do we remember or basically overcome or transcend polarity? Because I always talk about Earth as like the polarity planet. I don't know what it's like on Mars or Jupiter. There it might be quite different. But here on Earth, we are governed by the principle of polarity. You cannot escape it. We have day and night. We have love and hate. We have tall and short. We have young and old. There's no way to escape any of these governing principles. If you even look at the way our body is formed, right? I have a left hemisphere of my brain and a right hemisphere of my brain that are doing different things. And the news and the media plays into this, right? They know that the brain loves polarity, right? It's like candy for the brain, right? So it's all these like clickbait headlines or things that really make us identify with our separateness. But that's really the smallest part of who we are. And all yoga, including Kundalini Yoga, I think is really about like, how do we not associate it with the smallest part of who we are, which would be like our personality, our preferences, but instead, how can we associate and remember, or at least taste, kind of the biggest part of who we are, a little bit at least each day.
Oh, I love that. Oh my God, I could literally just like sit down. Can you just tell me the history of yoga and all of the like hours and hours? I could just sit and listen. I love that. And you know what? I feel like that the whole idea of polarity has been one of the ways that I have been able to integrate some of the massive challenges in my life. You know, like I think about my mental health journey, being diagnosed with depression and panic disorder and having like a good 7 years where I was like, do I, don't I, do I really want to be here? And I often reflect on that and think, you know what, I wouldn't have the love I have now, the life I have now, if I hadn't experienced that low. And even as I go through a divorce right now, same deal. Like, I so thought it was just going to be a walk in the park. It's not a walk in the park, but I feel like it's this journey. It's this like it's time for me to learn to love myself more, to come back to that wholeness. So, you know, everything you're saying really resonates. God, I don't know which direction to go because I want to know everything. But let's talk about the Kundalini awakening, because I suppose it's something that, you know, crosses also into people like, you know, Dr. Joe's work. Like, he doesn't talk about it necessarily as the Kundalini awakening, but he does, you know, in his meditations, he talks about getting the energy to rise from the tailbone up the spine, you know, to the pineal gland. So I would love, let's start with how does, you know, how is Kundalini different? Like, how is it different to the rest of yoga? And then let's talk specifically about a Kundalini awakening. Like, is it a certain time in our life? You know, can we do it over and over again? Like, what is it?
Yes. Well, the opening conversation we've had has been perfect, because you really can't understand Kundalini in a sophisticated way if you don't understand polarity. So this little journey we've been on so far together has just been absolutely perfect. And I think, you know, that's a great also kind of opening question. How is Kundalini Yoga different than Hatha or Vinyasa Yoga that people may be familiar with? And the way, and I have a whole episode about just that on my podcast. It's like 40 minutes long, but
Which I'll be going to listen to after
yes,
this.
but the cliff notes. Yeah, it's called How is Kundalini Different from Hatha Vinyasa? But the cliff notes is that the Hatha Vinyasa lineage, I really see, you know, the shapes we flow through in asana, those were originally designed to help the ancient yogis, sadhus, young men who were training for the equivalent of what would be like priesthood in today's society, preparing for a monastic life. It was preparing them to sit and meditate for long periods of time. I think people often forget that the entire asana, meaning yoga poses part of the yoga practice, was really just a precursor for meditation. My son's kindergarten teacher used to use this same technique. The kids would come to class and she'd have them all move. She'd be like, let's do the wiggles. She had little dance videos she'd do with them. And then she'd be like, okay, we're going to sit and we're going to do our, you know, math homework. What she realized is if she got people to move first, then they could sit and focus much better. So yoga basically is the same concept, right? If we flow through all these asana and postures, then we're really able to prepare the body to sit and then meditate. This is very different than the Kundalini tradition, which is actually intermixing and interweaving the 8 limbs of yoga. For anyone who's listening and familiar with that system, they're kind of mixing it together. It's saying, you know what, we're going to meditate between every single pose. We're going to inject sound into everything we're doing. Instead of the kind of the yoga practice or the yoga poses being a precursor for meditation, we're kind of going to fold everything together. The Kundalini tradition also has a diagnostic element where if you look at Kundalini, you'll see these things called kriyas. And Kriya basically Kriya means action. If we look at the actual Sanskrit definition, all Sanskrit words mean, 10 or 12 different things. So we have to put them in context. And in the Kundalini tradition, a Kriya is like a complete activity, a complete set of events, meaning that it's an energetic experience that's considered whole from start to finish. So a Kundalini Kriya is like a specific set of postures. And then we see that there's a Kundalini Kriya for the liver, or for anger, or for the adrenal glands. So we see kind of more diagnostic sequencing than perhaps we might in the Hatha Vinyasa tradition. And then this is really the kicker, is in Kundalini, the postures themselves, instead of flowing on the breath or, breathing in a warrior two, we're often doing repetitive movements, like twisting. If people can't see me, right, I have my elbows up and I'm twisting left to right kind of vigorously with the breath. Or, even punching, maybe making like claws with my hands and punching out. I'm doing kind of repeated movements for 2 to 3 to 20 minutes. And why am I doing this? Well, a classic phrase that we hear in Kundalini Yoga is poke, provoke, and elevate. So we're actually kind of trying. It's interesting because a lot of us associate yoga with, like, we do yoga to calm down, right? We do yoga to cultivate a parasympathetic nervous system state, to move into the rest and digest functions. Restorative yoga, yin yoga, great examples of this. Kundalini, though, is actually really working with, like, how do you respond to stress? We're going to poke you. We're going to provoke you. We're going to put some chaos into your system, as if you're a little, test tube. We're going to shake you up in order to try to change your vibrational state. And the Kundalini is often also called the science of angles and triangles. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but that's because a lot of the Kundalini poses kind of have your arms up, or you'll see the arm up at 45 degrees, or the legs up at 30 degrees. A lot of this is, if you've ever had acupuncture, they put the needles in you, right? Mm-hmm. But Kundalini is kind of like acupuncture in motion, where you're doing self-acupuncture. So by holding these poses for longer periods of time, in stillness or movement, instead of flowing through things and changing, it's like you're doing acupuncture to yourself by holding your arm up or your leg up. And this is said to secrete certain hormones and peptides in the body that then when you put your arms down or put your legs down, you feel really good, right?
Yeah.
It's like, ah. So a big frame here that was never told to me. I had a very negative experience with Kundalini when I first experienced it. We can talk about that if you want. But that Kundalini is a laboratory. Kundalini Yoga is a laboratory for you to put yourself under pressure, tension, stress, and friction, and observe how your body responds to stress. And I think when you go into Kundalini Yoga with that frame, and this is the traditional Kundalini Yoga, we can talk about feminine form a little later, but I wish I had known that, because a lot of people, their first experience with Kundalini Yoga is negative. That's what happened to me. I had a very negative experience. I was like, why do I have to hold my hands up this long? Why do I have to chant this for this long? Why do I have to do all these repeated, I was getting angry. A lot of times students come to me and they said the Kundalini is, making me angry. And I say, well, I had that same experience. It's not making you angry. It's just revealing the anger that's actually already there. And then we get to observe, when we look at the practice as a laboratory, well, what do I do with that anger? Some of my students, it's like triggers the shame spiral. I suck. I can't do this. I hate this. For someone like me, it actually, my anger was projected outward. I hate this teacher. This sucks. I hate her. Why is she doing this to me? So I had much more like a victim. So again, we're getting to see how when we put ourselves in challenging situations, or we put our body through challenging situations, we get to see how we habitually react to stress and what those patterns are.
Yeah, wow. And I have had, I've never done like a whole class, but I've had people come in and teach something. And that's really, so for me, I just quit. Like, I just went, I can't do this. And as you're speaking, I'm like, holy shit, I do that in the gym too. When it gets really hard, I just shut down. I just go, shut down, which is what I used to do as a kid. Just shut down. That's fascinating. I love it. I mean, obviously in the gym, I've learned just to go, okay, pick myself back up, just keep going, just pick it up again. But yeah, I think that's fascinating and so important to understand that that's actually that's the point. It's the whole point. Because I suppose, again, it's bringing awareness to something. And once we have awareness of something, we can change it, heal it, transmute it, whatever we need to do with it.
Yeah, a lot of times in Kundalini Yoga, we say we're creating nerves of steel, right? Meaning we're strengthening the sympathetic nervous system. We're strengthening our ability to withstand stress.
Yeah.
Another phrase that we use a lot is like, it takes pressure to make a crystal, right? It takes pressure to make a diamond, which is why I think people often come to Kundalini Yoga a little bit later in their yoga journey, right? It's sometimes people just go there right away, and that's great. But what I've found for most of my students is it's kind of what they get into kind of 6-7 years into the yoga journey, because they're like, I'm really ready to kind of challenge myself, honestly, a little bit. This is not a practice that's for the faint-hearted, and we have there's a trauma. My training is it's like a trauma-informed Kundalini teacher training, which seems like an oxymoron, right? Because there's many people who would say that Kundalini is the last thing you want to do if you're going through something traumatic, because you don't want to put your nervous system under more stress. But what me and one of my amazing co-teachers in the training, what we talk about is actually, if approached in the right way, it can be really empowering for someone with trauma, because they can say, I want to put my arms down, right? I'm going to notice how this feels, and now I'm going to make a different choice. But again, the frame of the practice needs to be very different, very specific than what most of us experience. For me, it's like I went into a Kundalini Yoga class and none of this was explained to me. No one was like, this is designed to poke, provoke, and elevate you. No one said, you might get triggered, or this might make you angry. So some of you might have great experiences with Kundalini Yoga, and it's just like a love story from the beginning. So I don't want to scare anyone off, but this was such a core component of my experience. And I like to really just educate people on it, because if the practice does affect you negatively, just know that there's nothing wrong with you. And that there's also, you can choose practices, kriyas, very strategically. This is something I teach about, is like having what I call 3 default practices if you're practicing within the Kundalini Yoga lineage. A kriya, or a set of postures that's easy for you, right? Like if I'm having a hard day, I can make it through this kriya. It's actually really soothing. It has long ongs. There's a lot of chanting, right? And then I have kind of the kriya number 2, which is a little bit more challenging, right? And then I have Kriya 3, which is like what I'm going to do on days I feel strong. This is a set of postures, breathwork, and chanting that's really pushing my buttons. Yeah. So I'm going to do those on days when I feel strong. So, especially if you're a woman, you're changing throughout the month hormonally. Maybe you have a new baby. Maybe you didn't sleep well. So having kind of 3 different types of practices for different days. When you need to baby yourself, you have something to go to. When you feel strong, you have something to go to. When it's kind of like, I just want a little bit, you have something to go to. I think that's a really sophisticated, nice way that everyone can start approaching the practice with.
Are you looking to build a successful human design or astrology business? Do you wish that you had your own chart tool on your website, so you don't have to send people somewhere else to get it? BodyGraph.com provides all the resources you need to turn this vision into a reality. We use this incredible software in our business to provide charts and custom reading reports at the click of a button, generate leads, and bring in lots of passive revenue. BodyGraph.com has already helped coaches and entrepreneurs generate over $2.5 million in revenue. If you're ready to take your business seriously, start with a free trial and use the code HumanDesignPodcast to get 30% off for 6 months. Here's what you can do with BodyGraph.com. Embed stunning charts directly into your website, build personalized lead magnets to grow your email list, create and sell detailed reading reports, and even use their free website builder to get started fast. BodyGraph.com is the ultimate all-in-one platform for building your human design or astrology business. If you're ready to join the community of successful entrepreneurs, visit bodygraph.com and start building your dream business today. Follow the link in the show notes and use the code HumanDesignPodcast to get 30% off
for 6 months.
I think about my human design. First, I want to say, because you're a 1-3 profile and you saying like, I don't want to scare anyone off. You're actually doing what the line 3 is on the planet to do. So the line 3 is the person that goes out and experiments with everything and then calls out what doesn't work. Like one of my besties is always like, whenever she has to try something new, buy a new product, go to a new service, she doesn't bother experimenting. She just asks me because she knows I've been to all of the practitioners or I've tried all the different products. So I just love that. And because you're a line 1, I actually was thinking this when you were interviewing me on your podcast. I'm like, there's this line 1, like getting into the details, like just really creating a solid foundation. So it's so beautiful to see that in real time. Then the other thing go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say, I mean, we can tie this back to polarity, but I don't know if you had a different question first.
I definitely I also just want to say, you talking about the 3 different options, and we could, from a human design perspective, we could integrate type into that, I think. But I was also thinking, I'm a manifesting generator. I'm designed to be out of my comfort zone, just like you. That's actually really big for MGs, to be outside their comfort zone and to be pushing their comfort zone. But I'm also an emotional authority. And as you were talking through that, I'm like, God, I get out of my comfort zone. I hit my stress levels consciously in a resourceful way all the time. And as you were speaking, I was like, yeah, wow, if that was me, I would probably be doing the harder things on the weekend. And then during the week, I'd just be being really gentle with myself because, I do love to work really big days and I get good old MG satisfied, used all my life force energy by the end of the day. So I have to be more gentle with the things that I do, especially the back end of the day. So I love that you could almost integrate the two, yoga. And I suppose it probably doesn't need to be just Kundalini with our type or with our authority or with the energy that we do have. That would be such a cool way to look at it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, we can nerd out more on that later too. It's like, what, and that's my book speaks to this using more the Ayurvedic framework, but it's like what yoga is advantageous to your personality type or to your energy level, right? So I think if you know your type, that's something that I think is very exciting. So maybe there's a future collaboration here.
I think so.
But yeah, to tie it back to polarity, because I want to make sure that, we circle through on what we talked about at the opening, is that if you do a Kundalini class or if you have, there's something very interesting that happens where we do these really difficult postures, right, that are challenging us. But then, or we're doing kind of fast pace. Remember, I talked about that classic twist or the spinal flex, right? That's another really classic one. If you're listening, just visualize doing cat-cow seated, right? You're going forward, back, right? Opening the chest and then rounding in a seated position. But then what you do between each of these little exercises is you stop at center and breathe. And what's really interesting is you can often feel your energy body still moving, but you're trying to come in to center. And what Kundalini Yoga really figured out is if we poke and provoke polarity by going left, right really fast, or forward, back really fast, or up, down really fast. And then we kind of shake up our energy body system like a little snow globe. And then we get really still, right? We're able to actually feel energy come into Sushumna or Brahmanadi, right? That central spinal cord, the central channel on which all the chakras reside, very quickly. It's like a so it's the more we feel in to the polarity, once we shake it up, if we're then very still, we can actually bring our energy to center and harmonize it and actually potentially lift it as well in a very kind of organized, methodical way. And I've trained 4,000 or 5,000 yoga teachers. So one of the things I also talk to a yoga teacher about, even in a hatha or vinyasa context, is visualize, even if you're driving right now, visualize standing on 2 feet, hip width apart. You rock into the balls of your feet, you rock into the heels of the feet, you rock forward and back, and then you find what feels like center for you. You have a stronger idea. Your proprioception of center is stronger because you felt into 2 extremes first, right? It's a classic teaching technique. Have your students feel into kind of 2 extremes in order to feel center in a better way. So I'm using this analogy to kind of explain what Kundalini is doing on both a physical and energetic level with our energy body. I mean, that's another big distinction is Kundalini yoga is working the energy body. It's not so concerned with the physical body, what I call the meat suit, the muscles and the bones, right? Like our vinyasa hatha practices. The Kundalini practice is very focused on, just moving energy. Like we're not doing, as many maybe warriors and lunges. There are warriors and lunges, but the focus is quite different. We're wanting to play and move energy. So that's where we come to this idea of polarity. We feel into polarity in order to transcend polarity ultimately. And we see this idea represented really nicely with the yantra of the sixth chakra. So I know Agnya chakra, this is said to be our seat of intuition. It's the sixth chakra. It's associated with the pineal pituitary gland. But what's interesting is the iconography, the yantra of this chakra is a two-petaled lotus. So a lotus flower with just two petals, one on the left, one on the right. And then there's the center circle, which is similar. It's the same as the bindi dot, if you've ever seen someone with a red dot who's Hindu. And basically what this is representing is the seat of the intuition, or the sixth chakra, being the point where polarities dissolve, where I'm no longer looking at the world and identifying everything as good, bad, right, wrong, hate, love, friend, foe, tall, short, I'm instead, I'm transcending and I'm tapping into what we call in Tantra non-dual awareness, non-dualism, where I'm actually able to see that someone might be a friend and a foe simultaneously. And that's not actually a problem. Or I'm actually able to see that I, deeply love my partner, but also definitely need to divorce them. And that those two things can be true simultaneously. And it's actually not a problem because I'm no longer associated with the labels. I'm more associated with my awareness, right? I have an awareness of my meaning maker and I'm not getting trapped by the polarity planet. I'm kind of associating with the world from this kind of non-dual view. So the traditional Kundalini model is that we need to take energy that the Kundalini yoga yogis say, the word Kundalini literally means coil. It's like the coil of a snake. The word in Sanskrit for snake is actually naga. So Kundalini is actually the coiling part of the snake. And they say that there's this serpent, which is, there's not an actual serpent, but it's like representative of this Shakti energy that's coiled 3.5 times around the base of the spine. In our trainings, we actually talk about it more living at the Dantian point, which would be a little bit higher than the base of the spine. But the point is the energy is residing in these maybe lower energy centers or lower chakras, and that we're doing all of this breath work and movement to create pressure, tension, stress, and friction, and almost like a hydraulic pump by doing all these different movements and then being still to actually urge or coax the energy up the spinal column towards the sixth chakra, kind of to the higher centers of the brain. If you want to get more anatomical, you could think of this as like we're moving the cerebral spinal fluid from, the base of the spine up. In the model that we talked about earlier, the myth of Shiva and Shakti, the way this is represented is it's the Shakti energy, the Kundalini energy that's coiled at the base of the spine that needs to move up to her lover, Shiva, which would be kind of up and out the crown of the head. So there's this union that's trying to happen. That is the traditional kind of Kundalini model. I have some problems with this model and alternatives, which we can talk about. But let's, pause there first, just to check in.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm loving it. Absolutely loving it. And I think it is, I think it's so fascinating just to understand how, this Kundalini, this form of yoga is such a completely different, like has a completely different purpose, as opposed to, the other forms of yoga that are helping us get into the parasympathetic nervous system. This is helping us get into the sympathetic nervous system. I also, I don't know, I love the whole idea of that, the energy, the snake moving up the spine. And I suppose it's just because I always feel like I have an experience of it. So I will often like just have a go at trying to draw that energy up while I'm meditating. And like I can physically feel it. So whether I'm convincing myself of it or it's actually something that's going on, I don't know. But like I can feel this whole wave of energy move through me.
Yeah, I love that. I think what's interesting, or one very compelling piece of this, is that we, the thing we're governed by on Earth School, besides polarity, is one other thing, gravity, right? That's the other key thing that is governing us. And gravity means that things move down, right? So the reason I bring that up is that, first of all, the refinement we can make, now that we're kind of all on the same page a little bit about this, is that the Kundalini energy is an orbit, right? So a lot of times people talk about it just as this movement upward, like a volcano, to have the energy move up. But the reality is, like, my Kundalini is flowing all the time. Granted, it might not be full force. There might be some kinks. But the Kundalini energy is moving all the time up Sushumna or Brahmanadi, which would associate with the spinal cord, and then down Ida, Pingala, and the vagus nerve. For those of you who are familiar with those nadis, what they're called, or similar to meridians in Chinese medicine. So we have this orbit, and then there's another actual Kundalini orbit going up the left arm and down the right across the heart. So it actually looks like a Celtic cross, the way this energy is moving. So it makes sense that then at the level of each of the chakras, right? Chakras can be in one of three states: a state of balance, excess, or deficiency, essentially. Either way, the energy can get stuck in certain energy centers, or this flow this free-flowing orbit can get disrupted by programs, things that we learn in our life, deficiencies or excess energy at the level of each of the chakras. Maybe there's physical manifestations of an injury or fascial restriction or scar tissue or whatever it is. And the key distinction I like to make here is that when it was presented to me originally, it was almost like you're lazy and there's something wrong with you because you're not moving this energy at the base of the spine up to the third eye. First of all, when we start to refine and think of this as an orbit, we see that model doesn't really make sense, right? This energy is always orbiting. And the Kundalini is free flowing at birth. So I always say, when someone's like, I want to have a Kundalini awakening, I'm like, you want to have a Kundalini reawakening, because the Kundalini awaken is actually your birthright. When you were born, like little you, and if we look at children, we really see this. They're healthy children, right? They're unencumbered. They just say what they think. They're so fully in themselves and their personalities and their beliefs, right? Their Kundalini is awakened, and it's through the process of growing up and going to school and being told to shut up and sit down and you can't do this. And, even the best intentioned parents, we're essentially programming our children at the level of each of the chakras. And this beautiful Kundalini orbit, starts to, I don't know if you want to think of it as like dimming or going off kilter. But the idea is that when you start working with energy, the Kundalini awakening is like the uncoiling of your essentialness. And I think this is really important, because that means, like, the Kundalini awakening in Emma, in you, is going to look different from Brett, my Kundalini awakening, right? Because it's going to be you with your personality, your authenticity, volume turned up 10 out of 10, right? For you. And for me, it's going to be Brett turned up 10 out of 10.
Wow. So how do I have one? And
well, that's always the ultimate question, right?
Can we book that in?
Can we book that in? Yeah. Well, this is something that, comes up in the Kundalini teacher training a lot. People want it. Well, so there's different types of Kundalini awakenings.
There's what's called, to say, tell us what they are.
Well, there's one that's called a spontaneous Kundalini awakening. And this is where someone, lands in one of our trainings, and it's because they've had a spontaneous energy release where they didn't cultivate this necessarily on purpose. Sometimes it's like they went through a breakup, or they were in a car accident, or they had a surgery, or they had a miscarriage, or someone died, or something happened. But basically, when I talked about like these potential restraints and blockages, the way I describe this is like, imagine like a dam that was dammed up, and then all of a sudden it's like waterfall, like the water is just flowing, right? So something happens in their energetic or physical system that causes this orbit that was somewhat restricted or dimmed to suddenly start moving very, very fast. And it can feel extremely overwhelming. This happened to one of my dear friends who I actually authored we co-authored an article about this on my blog called Resolving a Traumatic Kundalini Awakening, because he couldn't get off the floor for weeks. Like, it was really,
Wow.
really intense. So that would be like the spontaneous Kundalini awakening. And it's kind of similar to the definition of trauma. It's too much, it's too fast, it's too soon. The reason we're doing something like Kundalini Yoga is you want to be able to ride and harness this energy. I use the analogy, because I love horses, of like when you ride a horse, you're on this wild beast, right? But you're working together, you're in control, right? So you want to work with and have control over the energy. That's very different than being like a bareback on a runaway wild stallion where you feel terrified and have no control, right?
Oh my God. I love that you just used that example, because I also love horses. I have a horse myself.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
Yes. So the runaway stallion doesn't feel so good. So that would be the spontaneous Kundalini awakening. So, we definitely have people who are coming to us like with having had that experience. And then it's like,
So
okay, how do I tame and ride this energy?
Exactly. And I'm really curious about this, because I've often wondered about that experience. I mean, I certainly haven't had that experience, but like, what does it feel like for them? Like, I love that you even use the metaphor of the runaway stallion. It's like, so you're given the ultimate freedom. Here you go. Here's the ultimate freedom, but it's completely out of control. You don't know what you're doing, and you're feeling a little bit fucked, quite frankly. So what is this experience that they're having? Like, what does it feel like?
Well, it's going to be different for every person. I mean, for my friend, the energy was really trapped, kind of second, third chakra. Like, she was having a lot of hip pain, a lot of back pain. For someone else, it might be like migraines or headaches. I always say, if you're getting a migraine, or something like that after practicing Kundalini Yoga, you're not doing the right practices. You're doing something that's too fast, too furious. The other analogy besides the horse I often use with, like, I had to learn to drive a stick shift car as an adult, as a grown up. And, it's a lot. It's like the clutch, the brake, But really, you need those tools as a yogi, or I think as a human, really, to manage your energy body. I mean, yoga is the science of energy management. That's how I view it. Yoga is the science of energy management. There's amazing tools with breathwork, the power poses, right? There's so much feeding into this that shows us that if we control our breath and put our body in different shapes, we can really affect how we feel. But you need a level of expertise to be able to do that. So these people who are having these spontaneous Kundalini awakenings, it's like they don't know how, it's just all gas. They don't know how to drive the stick shift car yet. They don't know how to really navigate this energy, which is why they should practice or get into training, and that's why it feels so overwhelming. I mean, how it feels, I think that's going to be so unique for each individual, but migraines are one of the biggest things I hear, migraines, and then actual like physical pain in the body.
Yeah. Cause I was like, do they actually, like, what if they don't know about Kundalini? What if they don't know? Could they be presenting with, like you say, like migraines, hip pain? Like, could they just think that it's a pain that they've got in their body, but it's actually this sudden movement of energy?
Yes, absolutely. And then they'll probably end up at a doctor and be given sedatives or drugs or something.
Yeah, exactly. God, wow.
Yeah.
So tell me about the other way that we can have Kundalini, which sounds
so that's spontaneous.
Thanks.
Yeah. And then the other one would be, this is something that I'm seeking and I am cultivating. And something that I'm speaking about more and more is that I think, people, we tend to want kind of like an eat, pray, love experience, right? Where there's like a nirvana moment and I go to a retreat and all of a sudden, but something I really like to educate about is like, I am in the process of a Kundalini awakening that's like 15, 20 years long, where it's gradual. Like every year I'm feeling more myself. I'm expressing more authentically. I'm feeling, just like I have really great control over my stick shift car, right? Like my energy body, like I'm a really good driver.
Yeah.
So the fact is that some of us might have some really beautiful moments. And there are some moments that stand out to me. Again, one of them is in my book. I was practicing yoga in India, ironically, not in the ashram, in my hotel room, on my cell phone, to one of my teachers in America as recorded class. And I had, a pretty big energetic release that has stayed with, it's just one of those moments that stands out. But I always like to share that because it's like, I wasn't wearing white. I didn't have a turban. It wasn't 5 a.m. It wasn't at the temple, right? It was literally like in me in my pajamas with my, yoga mat between the wall and the hotel bed, at who knows when. So I think because Kundalini Yoga has a lot of rules or guidelines, people can get really hung up on like, it has to look a certain way. It has to be a certain way. My awakening can only happen, under like a predefined context. But, and I have an Instagram post that says this that I love. It's like one of my favorite posts, but it's like basically you can awaken at any time. You can awaken anywhere. You might be wearing yoga clothes. You might be wearing nothing. You might be in your car, right? Like I don't think there's like a recipe and that I have to be, because otherwise it leads into like this good girl perfectionist complex of like needing all these things. So, I mean, you definitely have to practice. That's a non-negotiable. But this awakening could be a couple key big moments, or it could be very slow, very subtle. And I'm not really chasing a big high at this point in my life. Like I know that I'm in this very slow Kundalini awakening process that's like a 15-year long process. And I'm okay with that. I feel good about that. And it feels very manageable for me.
Yeah, I love that. And I feel like there is a lot of people right now in our worlds, in the world, that they want the hard and fast. I know for me, for many years, I was always looking for the bolt of lightning. And to be honest, in so many cases, I've not experienced the bolt of lightning. I've experienced the slow path that is, consistent, reliable, and always gets you there. And, probably because I was trying so hard to take the fast track. So the thing that I'm curious about is how do we know that we've had a Kundalini awakening in the first place? Is it just a case of, I know I feel very authentically me. I feel free to be me. I feel confident to be me. Is it as simple as that? Can it be something, as you say, because it's so subtle, we almost don't know it's happening if we're not having one of these big awakening moments that are kind of a polarity?
I would say it's feeling you 10 out of 10. And one of my other courses, I talk about like you feeling like you're in your goddess of fun and light energy, or, translate that if you identify as, but you feel lit up. You feel like you volume 10 out of 10, and that you feel good. And then I think that would be a piece of it. And then the other piece of it would be I'm very aware. I have this elevated level of awareness, right? Coming back to that yantra of chakra 6, I am seeing when I'm triggered. I am seeing when my programs or my kind of demons, or what we'd call in yoga samskaras, right? These like habitual tendencies. I'm seeing when those come out to play. Like more often than not, I have this elevated level of awareness. You could call this witness consciousness, but I'm identifying, and this kind of comes back to where we started. Like I'm identifying more with the part of myself that is out there, rather than the part of myself that's like the grasshopper. Like I'm more the eagle in the sky than I am the grasshopper in the weeds, really thinking that this is good or this is bad. So it's this level of self-awareness, I would say, along with this deep, authentic, profound self-expression.
I love this. And I think that self awareness piece is so important because I think it gets overlooked. I know in my own journey, I didn't realize, the value of the self awareness. So, what I mean by that is, there was a part of me that was still like striving to heal and to evolve and to grow. And I was actually just voice messaging with a friend, and she said to me, like so many people have said to me before, she's like, wow, you're so quick at seeing the pattern or the program or whatever it is. Like, that's so awakened. And I did not put the two together. Like it's very rare that I will have, a reaction to something and be unconscious to the reaction. But I didn't realize that that was awakening at the time. I didn't realize that that was a demonstration of the height of my consciousness because I don't know, it just felt like I was still getting something wrong because I was still reacting. But the important part wasn't that I was still reacting, it was that I was watching myself react and I could make different choices. And I feel like that's such an important point for so many people listening to this podcast, probably listening to your podcast, that in so many cases, we're so much further up the mountain along the path than we think we are, because it's really about our level of awareness or consciousness, not about the fact that we're still being human.
100%. And, to kind of bring this full circle with the polarities, it's like, when we look at a lot of these practices, whether it's the Hatha Vinyasa tradition or the Kundalini tradition, like so much of the original intent was to leave and exit the body, right? To lift energy out of the body, sort of like I visualize like this volcano exploding, or like the body was often seen as an obstacle to overcome, right? The body wants food, the body wants sex, the body has all these pesky urges, and these practices were often done by people who were, again, this was the only thing they were doing. They didn't have a family, they didn't have kids, they didn't have a job, they were living in an ashram, or it was done by really elderly men who were literally preparing for death. They were like, I'm going to do all these yogic and meditative practices in order to prepare for the next life, because they believed in reincarnation. So like, I'm going to just really experiment with what it feels like to easily leave my body. And when these practices are taken in an extreme, that's what happens. But the reality, and this is why Tantra is such a key piece of all the yoga philosophy I teach. Tantra is really about weaving. That you can translate Tantra as to weave. And it's about like, how do I experience this energy, but also actually harness and channel it down through my body, right? So it's a great thing to have awareness. Like I can have so much awareness. I can be maybe channeling, maybe I'm really elevated, I'm so creative. But if I can't manifest any of those ideas, right, it's just worthless. So part of the reframe that I also talk about with Kundalini, in addition to being an orbit, is I actually teach the goal isn't third eye. Okay, we want awareness, but we actually want the heart as the fulcrum chakra. If we want to go back to the yantras, the iconography of the heart is the Star of David. So you guys can just picture two interlocking triangles. So it's the up energy and the down energy balanced, right? So I also feel like if I'm what the yoga, like a householder is what they call it in the Vedic life stages, but like I'm a person with a job and with responsibilities, I really want this active, I want the current of liberation in the body strong, but I also want the current of manifestation strong, which means I think, refining the way we potentially practice Kundalini Yoga, and that's what I like to teach, right? Is really not just teaching these practices that only raise energy, but that actually really help us integrate this energy in the heart. So I don't know, maybe
I love that. Oh my God, so much. And you're making me think of like a couple of other conversations I've had with, the first was with Jeffrey Allen, and he was talking about so many of us are walking around with this energy bubble that's like hooked under our chin, and it's all up here. And the job is to actually, really ground all of our energy into our physical body. And then it made me think about the conversation I had with Kathy Heller about the middle path. And I'm about to get the Vesica Pisces tattooed on me because, again, I love this concept of like the Vesica Pisces with the two circles that come together, because so often we're thinking about spirit or material, or we're thinking about masculine or feminine. But the whole point of being here on planet Earth, and as both of us being line threes, we love planet Earth, is to walk the middle path, is to be conscious of it's both, and I think that goes back to what you were saying about this shift from the polarity or duality into this, when you combine the two, it's all about the middle path. And that's where we kind of let go of good, bad, right, or wrong. So I loved it. So good.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting too, because that middle path, I definitely want to listen to your Kathy Heller episode. That can't, like, oh my gosh, the two of you together, that must be so fun. So I'm going to listen to that after this. But yeah, this balance too. I mean, the more that I've dived into this work too, I talk about, like, I think balance is an illusion, right? I think we can have these moments of like out there-ness where I'm like channeling, right? I'm connected with no thing, bringing it back to the beginning of the episode. I'm connected with however you define it. It could be God, it could be Jesus, it could be Purusha, it could be Shiva, it could be Brahman, witness consciousness, divine cosmic order, spirit, cosmic order, universal intelligence, like whatever you want to call it. There are those moments. But then, being alive means that I'm paying the toll of polarity, and that I like to use the word weave, right? I'm weaving between my masculine energy and my feminine energy, structure and freedom. I'm weaving between, love and consciousness. I'm constantly titrating, right? Which to me has to be done from the heart center, to be in this world, right? To show up in this world. So that means that, balance, I always say, is imbalance in motion. Like if you ever balanced in a tree pose, which is like a very basic yoga pose, right? You have one leg up, you're balancing on one leg.
I love tree pose.
People love tree pose. I sequence it in a lot. It's a fan favorite. Like everyone loves tree pose. But you'll notice, everyone, next time you do tree pose, like you're not still when you're balancing. Your ankles moving, your feet, like there's this constant kind of like micro movements of recalibration that's happening that allow you to stay centered. So I like to share that with students, because it's like if you have moments of feeling very emotional and then moments of like really embracing lots of structure, or just like what you were saying, on the weekend I'm going to do this, during the week I'm going to do this. We add in phases of life. Right now I have young children. It's going to be different when my children are older. There's this dance there. If some of you might have seen these depictions of Shiva, beautiful statues of Lord Shiva, and he's often on one leg with one leg up, and he's dancing on the world, and it's kind of symbolizing, the challenge, right, of being manifest is hard, right? Being on a polarity planet with a polarity brain, manifest in a world that's always changing. Seasons are changing. Everything's always changing around me, is very, very challenging. So I think, balance can be a tall order. So it's more like, how can I braid together, the energies that I need, or even dip my toe into these different polarities, but, have awareness of what I'm doing and why, and then kind of like weave this all together so I can show up like a genius in my own kind of unique life. So.
Oh my God, I love it. And it always makes me think about, because I also don't really believe in balance, but one of the alternatives to that I do love is harmony. It's about harmony. It's about everything working together. And being in harmony does mean that there's ebbs and flows, but things still work just the way they're meant to work when they're all in harmony. And I loved when you were talking about weaving. You were literally doing the infinity sign with your, I'm like, and there it is. There it is right there.
Yeah.
Loved it.
Yep.
Well, I cannot believe that we have been chatting for an hour. It has gone so quickly. I would love to have had more time with you, but thank you so much for being here and sharing your incredible wisdom with me and all the listeners.
Well, it's been such a joy. Thank you so much for having me, and I've had a lot of fun.
Yay. Well, thanks everyone for being here. I trust you got what you needed from today's episode, and I so look forward to having you on the next one. Bye for now.